Uh, Thanks, Malia. If we could go ahead and introduce yourself via chat. Want everyone to know we are going to have some guests over the next couple months. We just started our trial membership that some of you are probably very familiar with, but we have two organizations, Akron Children's Hospital out of Ohio and Keck Medicine, that are joining as trial members from now until about the end of October. So I don't see anyone from those teams on the call today, but they'll be joining various trial councils across the next couple months. So as we see them on the councils, we'll make sure to welcome them and let them introduce themselves. But we also have Brian Help joining the LD Council specifically as a member for the remainder of this year. So Maria and her team will hopefully be joining, if not today, over the next couple months. But looking forward to welcoming them as members for the remainder of the year. Other updates from the NCHL perspective, you've heard it once, you've heard it 1,000 times. Conference is coming up very quickly. I'm going to put in the chat a link to a Qualtrics form. We're doing our claiming for tickets a bit different this year. So if you are planning, whether you are planning to attend conference or not, we have a Qualtrics form that we have you fill out to let us know that. So let us know, I'm not planning on claiming my tickets for this year, or I'm planning to claim one or two or however many are allotted to your organization. So I'll pop that in there, and then I can stop bugging you about it, and we can get you all registered for conference and ready to go. We also did release some of our speaker notifications, so you'll start to see our agenda for conference start to populate, and we'll hopefully have that agenda go live next week, so we'll be able to share all of that really great content. If you have other folks that want to register for conference beyond the tickets that you receive through your membership, we have a registration portal that I'll also put into the chat here in just a few minutes. Other than that, Gale Warden is that same week. So if you're interested in registering for that as well, we have that registration link that I will pop into the chat. Any questions about conference or registering for the event that I can clarify before we get started? Seeing none. If you do have questions or folks that are interested and have some issues registering, feel free to reach out to myself or Malia, and we can get them all squared away for conference. But those are my updates, so I will hand it off to the team at UPMC, Jessica and Marielle. I hope I'm saying that correct. Marielle, perfect. But I'll hand it over to you both.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen. And it's great to be with everybody today. It seems like we have nice, smaller group, maybe. It's those summertime months. We know how that goes. I feel like we've had a lot of meetings canceled this month of July, but I think that means a lot of vacations. And so hopefully we can make this a good sort of two-way interactive dialogue. Of course, we have some slides prepared to share some information with all of you today. But we want to hear, your thoughts, what you're doing in your organizations, your questions that you may have as we go along. So don't hesitate to pop that in the chat or to come off mute as Marielle and I have a chance to share some information with you today. So I know most of you, but if I haven't met you, I'm Jess Beakley. I'm the Senior Director of Learning and Development with UPMC. I've been with UPMC for 13 years now, always in a learning and development capacity. And so I have seen a lot of growth in a lot of ways at UPMC over the course of those years. And I'm very excited to have Marielle, one of my colleagues here with me today. And she's going to take you through the bulk of our information we wanted to share shortly. I just wanted to kick off and start with giving you, and of course, can see our topic for today. We struggled with what's the right title for our presentation. We landed on leveraging learner data, which may or may not be compelling, but we're hopeful that the actual content we have to share with you is compelling. So again, we want your interaction and your thoughts as we go along. I wanted to start and just give you the kind of 50,000 foot view of UPMC if you aren't familiar with our organization. UPMC is headquartered here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is where I'm sitting today. We are both a healthcare provider and an insurer. And I have a number of stats that are going to pop up as we go along. The first being that we have over 40 academic community and specialty hospitals, primarily across the footprint of Pennsylvania and into New York, as well as Maryland. And then we also have a couple of hospitals internationally. We also have over 800 doctors' offices and outpatient sites across that geographic spread. 100,000 staff members. So remember some of these figures as we transition into the next slide shortly. Over 10,000 of those being leaders in the organization, and we employ over 5,000 physicians. And I think some of you are familiar sort of with our structure here in our learning and development department. We have sort of three arms of the team, and we are a centralized shared service for this vast organization. Many of you are familiar with Martina, who's with us today, who leads our physician focused efforts. She's had an opportunity to share at the NCHL conference last year about a leadership development plan program we've put into place for our physicians. And then today, I have another part of the team that focuses on all of our learning technology and self-paced education. But today, we've got Marielle here, who is from our team that focuses on staff and leadership development. So really, a large bulk of that 100,000 employee figure that we just talked about. And here you can see is part of that reporting structure from the overall department that focuses on these efforts. So a lean and mean team up against quite a lot of population size to really try to serve the needs of our staff and leaders. And so these are our fantastic team members. On the next slide, also wanted to talk with you just again, high level before we get into a little bit more of the nitty gritty we want to share today. But in order to meet the needs of those leaders and staff, we have a variety of things we're tasked with throughout that employee life cycle. We are responsible for the orientation experience. So we handle all of that content. We onboard our new leaders into the organization. And then, of course, we have a really robust catalog of offerings for both staff and leadership development. We've taken a couple of specific initiatives, one of them being developing learning pathways to really ensure that we're creating a nice pathway to reach those masses as much as possible through more of an individualized experience. So we have these tailored learning pathways, but our functionality from a technology perspective still allows us to have those learners choose their own adventure to a certain extent. They have different offerings within the pathway that they can choose to customize that experience while still ensuring that there's sort of this main integrity that is maintained throughout the pathway itself. And so those are a number of the ways that we kind of guide our staff and leaders through opportunities. And like all of you, I know, no matter the size of the organization you're in, our constant battle of where do we go deep and where do we go broad. And so certainly the team spends most time, I would say, on more of our targeted consultation and interventions with leadership teams, with key teams across the organization where they're developing very customized learning plans to support them. And I asked Marielle to join us today to talk about how I think another battle that many of us fight. How do we continue to look at the impact that our learning is having Are we seeing behavior change? Are we finding efficiencies in the ways that we are following up with and kind of reinforcing and engaging our learners after these instances? And Marielle has brought a really rich ability and expertise to the team where she has been able to help us form a dashboard. And she's going to be able to share and navigate some of that with you today. So without further ado, I'd love to turn it over to you, Marielle, to share with us some of the ways that we are looking at how we gather data, what we do with it, how we communicate, all of those good things. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jess. I appreciate it. So hi, everyone. My name is Marielle Salduti. I am a learning specialist with the learning and development team here at UPMC. Prior to coming into this role, I had no learning and development background other than being a high school teacher. And so I was able to kind of bring I taught special education, and a lot of the things that we did in special ed had to do with data collection and leveraging that information to then make decisions. And so as Jess said, that was one of the pieces that I was now able to bring into this role. And again, look at the impact of the courses that we're facilitating, even looking at where we're facilitating courses and how we're doing it, to then be able to make the best decisions for our team. Because as Jess pointed out, we are a small but mighty team. So it is that consideration all the time. Where do we go deep versus where do we go broad? And so that's really what the purpose of the dashboard is part of the purpose, I should say, in terms of making some of those decisions and helping our team have conversations around those pieces. So to give you a bit of an understanding as to kind of what it is that we're collecting within the dashboard, first, we look at our facilitation data. So we're looking at the actual courses that we facilitate, including, as Jess mentioned, those ones that come from our course catalog, but then also any of those requested offerings that we have. And when I talk about the difference between the two, our requested offerings really talk mainly about the offerings that we have that are part of our catalog, whereas one-offs are those pieces that aren't part of our catalog as of now. Then the other pieces that we pull in there are the number of learners and the time that we're dedicating to them. And then, as just mentioned, looking at the impact of the training. And the evaluation results are one of those things that up until 2 years ago, we, like many other organizations, used traditional smile sheets. And one of the things that we learned was that it just wasn't giving us as facilitators the information that we wanted and needed, in order to really make changes and make sure that we were having the intended impact that we were hoping for. So what our team decided to do is we took a new approach when it came to looking at our course evaluations. And essentially what we did is we moved from those smile sheets to targeted questions to really make changes for the facilitators to be able to make changes and better understand our learner behavior. So we read this book. I recommend it to anybody that is looking to kind of revamp some of their evaluations, because the questions are really designed in a way that, one, helps the facilitator to make some targeted changes, but also one of the things that I find interesting is that the questions are designed in such a way to make the learner pause rather than just, how many times do we go and take an evaluation or some sort of survey in a day and we're just kind of circling all fives or all middle of the roads, right? We're not taking the time to pause and read. And so that was one of the other pieces that we wanted to do when we looked at these course evaluations and revamping them. And so one of the things that was most challenging is that each of the evaluations had to be specific to each of the courses, because that was where we were going to get the most information. But what we did with those questions was we made sure that every single survey had 3 targeted questions around these 3 areas. So we had ability, understanding, and motivation to apply the learning from the class. And what we did with this was that after each facilitation, regardless of if you were in person, you were virtual, if it was a requested course or part of our calendar course offerings, we made sure that this was available at the last 5 minutes of every course, because we found, and I'm sure most of you that are in any sort of data collection know that when you send it out in an email, you get less than if you're kind of put on the spot to do it. So we wanted to give the learners an opportunity to really get a chance to answer those questions in the moment when it came to these 3 areas: ability, understanding, and motivation. One of the things that we did as well with this, when we looked at kind of how do we continue to support the learning, is that we send a 3-week follow-up. And the 3-week follow-up is the same for every single one of our courses. It asks questions about, have you applied the learning? And it gives an opportunity for the learner to talk about the impact. And so that's where we've been able to see some of those big correlations in terms of behavior change that we've been looking for. So in terms of kind of getting a full scope of what this looks like in our learner engagement, right? We give that survey, as I mentioned, at the end of the course. And then let's say somebody has to hop off early or they didn't get to that point. We also send a day after a copy of that survey. And with that, we send one of the other elements that we use to engage our learners, which is a follow-up link. And I'll preview that for you guys in just a minute. But what that allows us to do is, again, to have the learner keep what we've just informed them of front of mind. And so those follow-up links, different than the follow-up survey, right? Because we have too many follow-ups of everything. But the follow-up link is an Oracle Rise, or excuse me, not Oracle. It's a Rise platform that allows learners to continue to engage with the materials at their own pace. So our courses are live, and then this follow-up link allows them to engage at their own pace and to be able to refer back to it as needed. One of the other pieces that we found to be really beneficial when it came to the learner engagement was also, tapping into their leaders. And this was one of those interventions that we used our platform to be able to do that. But we send an email to each enrollee's manager a week after, letting them know, hey, this person has enrolled in the course, and I'll show you what that email looks like. Because we found that, one, it helps to have conversations around it, right? We are able to see the learning be spread throughout those different groups. But then it also gets the leader involved in somebody's growth and development, which ultimately is what we are here to do, is to promote that growth and development. And then third, as I mentioned, we do that 3-week follow-up survey. Again, they get another reminder of that follow-up link in case it got buried in their emails, but then they get that follow-up survey to ask us, or excuse me, to provide us information on how they've actually used the learning. So just to give you a bit of an insight as to what that looks like. So 1 day post-course, the participants get an email just thanking them for attending. Again, it has a copy of the link that's available to them in terms of the follow-up link. And then it also has this evaluation. And you'll see that this evaluation looks different than our traditional Smile Sheets, right? It's asking about specific content that we've reviewed in the class, but again, they're all around motivation, ability, and understanding. And again, it helps us as facilitators to be able to use that information. Then when I talked about the follow-up link, again, just giving you an idea of what that looks like, this is self-paced for the learner to, again, continue to engage in the material. So they get another copy of what's been provided in the course. But then in addition to that, they also have opportunities and additional prompts, because our classes are only an hour long, to continue to engage and use the learning in their day-to-day lives. And so there's opportunities to practice individually and engage with others. And then we let them know of other learning opportunities, because as I said before, we want them to work on their learning and continue to develop and grow as they continue on. So there's just a variety of opportunities for them there. Then we also send this email to the leader a week out, and it just lets them know that the direct report attended the course. It tells them explicitly what the course is. And then it asks them to do basically 3 things with this information. Encourage the person to tell you about their learning, and also how they're going to apply their learning in their role. And then hopefully they'll also have the opportunity to present their key findings to the rest of the team. And that just helps with the overall engagement, and also gives opportunities for even things like retention and growth and development within a simple prompt like this, where the leader is encouraging this for their direct reports. Now, with all of these pieces, we get a ton of information from those evaluations, and that's where we compile all of these results. And this has been very much a labor of love, but as just said, this is a dashboard that all of our teammates on our immediate team have access to. And it updates every day at noon, so it stays live constantly. And what's great about this is if any of you have ever used Power BI before, anybody that has access can kind of click around and play around. It's almost like a playground. You can't break it. And so as each teammate is involved and in the in the dashboard, it doesn't affect anything else. And so, or any other user, I should say. So it's really neat to be able to kind of use it for everyone's unique needs. And I say that because our team has a variety of goals and all of us have, different goals, but what those goals are all focused on is data. And so the platform is called Power BI. Yeah. And so that would be, and I'll preview that for you. It's a Microsoft opportunity or Microsoft app basically. But it pulls in all of this information and then we're able to create a dashboard. So that's what I'd like to share with you next, but I have to change my screen. So just give me one second to be able to do that. But as I do that, is there any questions kind of on our engagement strategy as I pull that up? No? Okay, great. I love that. All right, give me 1 second to pull up the dashboard. So as I said, this is our dashboard and it updates daily. And our immediate team has access to it. And give me 1 second. I just realized that my screen is having a moment. So hold on 1 second for me. I apologize. There we go. So what we can do with this information is a variety of things. So this is our landing page, and we can use this information as our general facilitation data to see kind of where our energy is used, what are our top classes, are they being more requested, or are they being more highly involved when people are coming to our calendar offerings. So we have a lot of information that we can gather through this. And we can also use the filters on the side at any point to see, okay, was Q1 any different than Q2 in terms of how we, the number of people that we facilitated to. So it's great. We can put a bunch of different filters on the information and it will basically reflect whichever filter is applied. So I can see that in Q1, we had a total of 5,308 participants, and in Q2, we had less than that. So we could ask ourselves, again, conversations within our learning and development. Why is that? What is the information that we can kind of glean from it? We can also see what courses were highly attended during that time. So we can see for us, it would have been dealing with difficult interactions. So we could begin to ask ourselves, why do we think that is? Oh, great question, Melissa. So calendar participants, we have a calendar that goes out to the entire organization, and that is available. They can enroll themselves and join the class when it's time to go on. And then when it comes to requested courses, those are where we've talked to the director or their leader, and we come in and facilitate that. So the way that we see the difference in those participant numbers is the data that you see for the calendar courses is collected from one area of our team, and then the requested course information, again, the classes that were taken, the number of participants there, that is reflected in a different form that our team uses so that we can compile everything together, but they are at least separated in terms of seeing, again, where are we spending our energy.
Can I say it back to you real quick to make sure I'm clear on that?
Yeah.
So you may be requested by a leader to come in and the leader says to you, I'm having XYZ challenges, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, okay, my diagnosis is the 5 C's of communication is really going to help you.
Mhm.
That's the one that you're calling requested.
Correct.
Gotcha. Thank
Correct.
you.
Yep, no problem. So that's when we go in, whereas the calendar is just like as blatant as can be. We put a calendar out for the entire organization to use. Anybody can sign up for those. And those are the people that remain in that kind of house of calendar participants. Yeah. And then Aubrey, to your question about facilitators, we do. So there's a question at the end that allows for conversation around the facilitators. Again, part of the piece that we learned within the readings that we did in the research that we had done for this was that we weren't getting very valuable information from the smile sheets explicitly on the facilitators themselves. And so one of the pieces I'll show you in just a minute is that we, instead of kind of asking, rank your facilitator, we leave open-ended questions, and we get much more thoughtful data in those pieces than we did in the traditional smile sheets on that explicit evaluator, or excuse me, explicit facilitator. So we do get that information, and I'll show you that in just a second in terms of how that is built into the dashboard. But again, we can leverage this information for a variety of different things, but it is neat to, again, have it be interactive as we go through. So this is our general landing page. And then with that, and again, Melissa, to kind of paint a more clear picture, we have a page explicitly for just our requested course data. So this is where we as a team can come in and see, okay, overall this year, we've gotten a ton of requests in terms of conflict resolution. So we as a team can talk about why that might be, thinking about targeted interventions. Is it that we do a leadership type of activity where we're equipping more leaders with conflict resolution abilities to then be able to tell the rest of their teams or work with the rest of their teams? So we can leverage a lot of this information. And in addition to that, we can see some of those one-offs that we're getting. What are those questions or requests that people are asking that we don't already have curriculum for? So a lot of times it's things like team alliances or emotional intelligence is another big one. So as a team, we can talk about, is this something we want to create for a system-wide education, and then be able to share that and, again, leverage that in terms of what makes the most sense for our tiny team to be able to do. And then we have our calendar courses. This is pretty blanket. This is just an attendance number and where we see the most in terms of our participation. But the pièce de résistance, if you will, of all of this is going to be the evaluation data. So as I mentioned before, while each evaluation has different questions based on ability, understanding, and motivation, all of those have the same, that was a bad segue. All of our questions are different, but all of them have topics in ability, understanding, and motivation. And so as you'll see on the screen, what we can then do with that information is see overall how successful are our learners in understanding how they're applying their materials. So we can see that for us, we have, and of course, on a day where I'm presenting in front of people, it doesn't want to work. But we can see that 70% of people have said that they can be successful now in terms of using the learning from their class in their day-to-day. Another thing that we can do with this is as you click in the dashboard, you can see how other people responded to those other questions. So of the 1,500 people that said that they can be successful now, some of them did say that they had an expert level ability. We can see only 33 of those 1,500 said they had an expert level ability, but 738 said that they are able to have a full understanding of the learning. So again, it's very interactive in terms of how we are able to leverage this information when we see what tweaks, even as facilitators, we might need to make when it comes to if there are pieces that just are being missed. So for example, we see that when we have 416 people that say in our courses they need more experience, that might mean to us that we need to build in more time to actually practice the content that we're talking about, not just giving them a theoretical type of activity or engagement, but actually giving them time to use the learning and put it into practice. So just thinking about what is available and how do we use this information as facilitators, and also how do we make decisions as a team when it comes to them. So in addition to having these three pieces, you'll also see in the gray, that's the information that comes from those follow-up surveys. So this is, as Jeff mentioned, where we see that behavior change or the beginning of the behavior change. We can see that in those that have answered our survey, that if you add these two, so 58 and 13%, so 71% have used our learning in some capacity in their job. Some of them use it regularly. Most of them have used it a few times. Whereas some may have a plan to use it, but they haven't done it yet. They've almost all said that the course has facilitated to their skill set in some way, which obviously is good to hear. But one of the pieces that, again, we find really informative, and when we think about our engagement strategy, why we do what we do, is that we see that not a ton of leaders have checked in with their employee, even though we're sending this, conversation about, or excuse me, this email about having a conversation. However, one of the things that is important to note is if I click yes here, we can see that of the folks that do have a check-in with their leader, we actually have a higher rate of those people using their content regularly than if they did not have a check-in with their leader. So again, thinking about how do we use this information to really have that behavior change that we are looking for. So this is a general piece of the information, but then what we do on each individual course that we have the exact same type of dashboard, if you will. So you can see on this piece, what is the explicit question asked for each of those areas, again, in ability, understanding, and motivation, and see how that works with kind of the grand total and seeing where we want to make changes, where we need to make adjustments and things like that. So we can, once again, the power of the filter, we could see that if I make an intervention of any sort with my team after Q1, I can see, has that impacted the results in Q2 at all? So again, this allows us as a team to think not only about what interventions are in place or what changes we might want to make, but also we can see, okay, so from Q1, we had 8 that were using the content regularly. And in Q2, we only had 4. So what might have changed that, we're not using it as frequently or whatever it might be, but we're able to compare with those pieces. And then as the final piece, wanted to just let you know that the other thing that we are able to do with this is we're able to look at those overall questions when it comes to hearing the voices of the people, if you will. So we've given the opportunity to give some feedback on each of the courses. That's these open-ended questions. And as a learner, as a facilitator, what I can then do is I can go in and look at the course that I facilitated. I'm going to go to the one that I just did this one. When it comes to looking at, the impact that we've had. And what I can do is I can filter my name and the course that I facilitated, and I can see that, direct response that comes from that. So as somebody asked before, how do we evaluate the facilitators, Aubrey, this is a way that we can go in and see that information. We can see what people said, one, about the course as a whole, but a lot of times this is where we get really informative information from those learners, as opposed to, I know I talk quickly, and sometimes that's an area for improvement that's mentioned is, just slow down a little bit. And it's helpful for me to read that, where on a traditional smile sheet, that's not always the case. And so it's really great. And it's another opportunity to have the learners' voices be heard, because that's where we can see, again, how they're using or how they plan on using some of this information, or even what's been disclosed recently is some of the areas where people have a concern with using the learning. And we as a team can then talk about, how do we make this easier for them, or how do we help them to do that? And then the final piece I just want to share is not only do we have the initial, but then we have the 3-week follow-up information as well. And that's where we see the impact of the courses that they've taken and how they've been able to apply their learning. And so you can see for a class like our communications class, right, people are more aware of their communication practices and, asking about some of the other things that they might have thought were going to be a part of the course that weren't, then we as a team can talk about what that means. And so I know I've gone through the dashboard really quickly. Are there any pieces so Melissa, if all of our offerings are virtual or some, so we do a bit of both. We have for our calendar courses, those are all virtual, whereas our requested courses can be a mix of in-person, virtual, or hybrid. So you can see kind of what the makeup of that looks like in terms of, how we're facilitating to different groups. And again, this is all captured in that data that we're looking for. This was not built in Qualtrics. This was in Power BI. So within Microsoft. Yeah. Any other questions? Again, I know I ran through that pretty quickly, but thinking about, how we're leveraging all this information, ideally what it is that we are doing is we are, as a team, able to make minor adjustments in facilitation, but then we're also able to have full team discussions in terms of, what alterations do we need to make, what content do we need to review, We're even in the process now of piloting delivery methods. So traditionally our courses are an hour. We're increasing to an hour and a half based on that piece where a number of people talked about increased experiences. So building in more activities to be able to do that. And we'll see, you know, what changes from that. And so, yeah, that's how we're using that. I see a number of questions. So sorry, there's a lot of questions. So Crystal, to your question, in terms of how long did it take to build? I'm going to be honest, it took some time. It took a lot of work. It was kind of piece by piece. So what we did first was we started with the evaluations. We did a revamp of those. And then once we had some of the data from that, and again, we use all Microsoft products. So at least by getting the evaluations through forms, we were able to see some of these kind of visuals that are built, but they were individualized. And so the report itself, the dashboard that's just said, was a culmination of all of these moving parts. So that I have no IT background at all, zilch, zero. Like I'm not 100% sure how I was tasked with this, but I ended up enjoying it. But I will tell you that it's a labor of love, but once it's done, you're like, Jess will test. I sang at the meeting that it was presented at because I was like, it's finally done and it's something to show and it's something to be proud of as, you know, it was built. So I appreciate that. And then Aubrey, you asked how often do we review? So as a team, we meet every week. And most of the time, some piece of data is brought up. Again, as I mentioned, we have 10 annual goals that we, you know, are their annual goals. So we're working on them constantly. And most of them draw some of that data. And so we have different conversations around it. And then in terms of the content itself and when we're making changes, we try to start making changes. Like if we decide as a team, as I mentioned, like we're piloting the timing, we make changes at the change of the month, because that way we can filter the information on the dashboard to see the changes in responses. So rather than making any sort of alteration and mid-month and not being able to really decipher the data, we can see how any change in intervention might impact that. And then do we have survey fatigue, Robin? I would argue that anybody has survey fatigue. One of the things that was really interesting actually from that book was talking about, as an average American consumer, I think we get something like 17, in a way we are presented with 17 different surveys a day. And when you think about, like, anytime you go shopping, anytime you go, you know, to the drugstore, whatever it might be, you're presented with an opportunity. You might not see the actual survey, but you're given a QR code, you're given something to, you know, encourage you to do that. And so that has been a conversation that we've had. And so when we talk to our learners about it, a lot of times, at least for me, I phrase it in the way that, like, this isn't necessarily an evaluation, but this is just a way for me to understand how I can better serve you and, you know, your team by understanding how you feel like you're using this information or how you're going to use this information. And again, when we catch them in the class, they're more likely to do it and kind of more responsive. They're more thoughtful in their responses for those short answer pieces. But, you know, it's one of those things that, yeah, I would argue, yeah, probably some of them are tired. To Jess's point about our size, I will say that a lot of times we don't, unless a learner is in one of those pathways where they're kind of taking courses more consistently, you know, some of our learners only come to a class every 3 months. And so it's not like we're constantly bombarding them with our surveys, but granted, yes, they're given surveys frequently for a variety of different things. It's not just us. And then I think that's it for questions, but I'm still open to any more, but I know I've been talking a lot and I have definitely gone
So,
over.
so I have a question real quick. I have actually 2 questions real quick. Surprise, surprise. So I'm curious if your data showed any decline in satisfaction or usage with virtual over in-person classes, or have you been able to look at that?
Yeah, so the data that's on this current dashboard is just from this year, and we've been doing the virtual courses,
okay,
right? Or yeah. But I can say that from some of the feedback, again, moving from the smile sheets, we had smile sheets up until last year.
Mm-hmm.
some of them would talk about that. And there is frequently conversations, even in the feedback that we get now, that says, I wish this would have been in person, or I wish I could have attended this in person. And I will say to a lot of the times that we see that, one of my team, whoever's kind of facilitating that course, we can reach out to that person and let them know, hey, let your leader know that we're happy to, within reason, come to you if there's another topic that you think would be beneficial to your learning. And that's how, as Jess mentioned, we get into those learning plans and get into some of those other things that we're able to do with teams by having a conversation because they've attended, one of our virtual classes first.
Perfect. And so my second question is actually for Jessica. Jessica, how do you, as the leader, make decisions around when it's time to add another course? Is that tied to your strategic priorities as an organization? Is that part of the leadership discussion? How are you as an organization, I guess, deciding, you know what, we really need to double down on change management this year and we need to add content or something like that?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Melissa. And truly, the team I give them tons of autonomy too. As you can see, they're big on gathering data and feedback. And I think this dashboard has made it easier than ever before to be able to see, particularly with those customized requests, where are we seeing needs that are not being addressed currently? Where we're having to do a little bit of that dance to create something and deliver it. And so I think that has been a great driving force in, okay, clearly there's a need here. Let's build something out a little bit more, whether it is adding a new course, et cetera. And then we draw from so many other sources of data. I mean, those constant conversations that the team's having in consultation with our business units. I am tuned in with every HR leader that is sort of decentralized across the organization. And so we're always having those conversations. What's coming out of talent review discussions, for example? Many of you, depending on the timing of your performance cycle, my colleagues in TMOD are really just coming out of those discussions for the year. And that will be a really good source of intel. We've been in the news a bit this year with some of our financial challenges. And so lots of change coming down the pike. So we're tuned in with, our key senior leaders as well. What are those greatest needs? How can we help to come alongside and address them? And we always want that message to be, part of our danger in such a large organization is that balance of consistency and standardization. What is our collective message, and what are those maybe collective marching orders in some sense? So how do we make sure that we do have that connection across those leaders and that buy-in and support, which the team then reinforces through all of those relationships that they've built across the organization. It's tremendous. Now, as you can see, this team up against what they are up against and the significant impact they can have, just seeing that it looks like thus far in the year, we've already reached over 9,000 learners, which is tremendous. At any rate, I think we pull from so many of those sources. We just had our employee engagement survey too, for example, which, back to the survey fatigue question, I am so impressed by the way that our leaders have really bought in and I think emphasized the importance of sharing your voice. We had 83% participation across the organization, and that's a big lift across the amount of individuals we have here. So that was another big win for us. Making sure that we're getting those voices, that also helps us to get the feedback we need on development that's needed, because there's a whole dimension related to that. And then additionally, something that I share a lot, especially in an organization as broad as ours, that could be helpful to consider in some of yours. We have, and I don't know, the name might be a misnomer. It started several years ago. A group was formed that we call Change Champions. And what it consists of are both the HR leader, typically the HR director from that hospital or business unit, as well as a couple of key operational leaders from that business unit. And so the group is small enough when you're thinking the 40 plus hospitals I shared that we have, as well as the additional business units. But those leaders get together and they are such a great source to bounce change off of. Hey, here's something we're thinking about, or here's what's coming, or hey, we want your input on this. So for example, we surveyed those change champions this year to say, what are you seeing are the greatest needs in your business unit? We do a little bit of in surveying them, again, survey fatigue maybe, but we're trying to also get a sense of, are they aware of what is available? And so it's helping us validate maybe what we have already that we can better communicate to those areas that they may not be taking advantage of, but also where do we have some of those gaps that we need to address. So lots of ears out always to say, what do we need to add or sunset or enhance? And the team is always incredibly responsive to those needs. Hopefully that helped to answer that question, Melissa.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions or feedback or best practices that all of you are doing that you can share with us too? We're always looking for good input and guidance. Glad that you all have hopefully found this helpful too.
Sounds like we need like a 101 in Power BI.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And you can tell Marielle is incredibly humble because she truly, I mean, I think all of us, every time she pulls this up, we're all like, how did you do this magic again? What? And she's like, I have no background in this, but it just goes to show when you want to learn and figure things out, you put your mind to it. She's been such a great example of what can be accomplished. And we're very grateful for you, Marielle.
Fantastic.
I will tell anybody that wants to learn, LinkedIn Learning was my go-to. So
There you go.
There you go. There's lots and lots and lots of trial and error.
And Aubrey, oh.
Yeah, one more question in the chat.
I saw Aubrey's question about if leaders are required or most opt in. It's a great question. We, our new leader onboarding that we call Drive, while not mandatory, I know we all love that language around, it's strongly encouraged. And so we do see, because that is the enrollment process kind of occurs as they go through promotion or their overall onboarding into the organization, they're signed up for it, they come. So we don't require, unless it is one of those targeted interventions where perhaps their leadership team has said, yes, the expectation is everyone is going to go through this. So we do not require much of this education. It's more, we want them to come. So that's what we use as a bit of our guide to see, are they coming? And we do get a lot of interest. I think, again, like any, we see that those who sit in the unique makeup of our organization, we do see greater attendance ability from our corporate and insurance services colleagues who maybe have more of the desk job than all of our clinical leaders, certainly. But I think the team has been really responsive to creating things that are digestible in time that they can step away and take advantage of. That's a great question about Harvard Manage Mentor. I don't know if anyone has used both that and LinkedIn Learning, and if you have any preference one way or another. LinkedIn Learning, I'll just share, we've had a good experience with it. We're Oracle Cloud early adopters, which has its blessings and curses, as you can imagine. But we just had the ability to enhance our user interface for our learning management system. And that has allowed us to fully bring in the portfolio of LinkedIn Learning into our HCM. So it's, I think, really enhanced the search capability for our learners. something our team was very mindful of was how do we distinguish visuals, because it looks very Netflix sort of appearance, which is great aesthetically. How do we ensure we're calling out this is instructor led and this is a LinkedIn Learning course? And so we were very mindful of that in the imagery that we used, so that we can ensure that we're helping to guide people appropriately based on their needs. But we've had a good experience with LinkedIn Learning. I have not used Harvard though. Has anyone used anything else? Any of those other sort of supplementary learning platforms that you've had a good experience with, or?
Robin, how is that working out? The connected Harvard with your LMS and Workday?
It actually just makes it a more seamless experience for our leaders, and it works really well. So we have principles of leadership pathways that every new leader is automatically placed on. And a couple of our modules, it's self-led. They have 12 things to do in 12 months. And such as our change management module links directly to Harvard. Harvard has a on-demand module about it. We also have, I think it's all part and parcel. We call it the expansion pack. We have Spark as well. So we have Harvard Managed Mentors, about 45 modules, and you can pick and choose. Sometimes it's articles or videos, or they come with a lot of tools that you can download and use with your teams of evaluations on a specific topic. They also have cafes if leaders want to do lunch and learns, and maybe some are doing book clubs with their teams. And the cafes are PowerPoints, facilitator guides, everything a leader could just pluck and pull and just use for an hour, half an hour, 15 minutes, whatever they wanted. So we're kind of having a lot of fun. We have looked at LinkedIn Learning. It was more expensive for us to go with. We loved the tool. We loved the functionality of it. And I'm just always open to I'm hearing LinkedIn Learning more and more. And so I'm curious if I need to start looking at that again.
So real quick, I'm curious about Harvard. Do you have to curate the content? Like, do you have to create the content for people? No.
They do it for us. Part of our, it's kind of fun. Part of our partnership with them of our contract, they will do that for us. We'll say, we want to do this, and they'll put things together for us. We've actually built a new Nurse Leader Academy and link through Harvard because the platform is so easy to access, whether you're internal or external to the organization. They helped us build out the pathway, even with our own content in it. So it's been a really fun tool, and they update it every time they have something new. We'll have access to all the articles. So we don't need both an HBR subscription as well as this. It's all a LinkedIn, or even we have access to their case studies when we're running our programs, particularly with our physicians who really want science-backed data information. So it's been a really great tool for us.
That's really great. Thank you.
That is great. And Robin, I don't know, I'll just share that part of with LinkedIn Learning, we've been fortunate because we have an affiliation with the University of Pittsburgh, pricing wise. So I don't know if Intermountain has any type of academic affiliation, but maybe something to leverage if any of you are considering LinkedIn Learning.
Oh, okay. We do not have an academic affiliation currently, but I didn't realize they gave discounts. So, we are connected with local universities, and we're in 9 states. So in Colorado and Utah, we are linked into local universities there. But thank you. That could be something to take a look at. Thank you. I love that.
Yeah, sure. Well, we really appreciate the time too, and everybody's engagement. It's been great questions and discussion, and we thank you for giving us the time today to share Marielle's and the team's great work.
Fantastic presentation. Thank you all for hopping on today. And our next call has been moved a bit around. just so you know, we have a joint call with the DEI Council for August. We'll be looking at having that on the 28th, towards the end of the month. It'll be allyship and leadership, a really heavy discussion, but looking forward to seeing you all then. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.